Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Easy English Podcast. I'm Hannah, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Alex. How are you today, Alex?
Hi, Hannah. I'm doing great, thank you. And a big, warm welcome to all of our listeners out there, whether you are cooking, walking, or just relaxing at home. Today, we have a very special episode for you.
Yes, we do. Today, we are going to share a slow, beginner-friendly story. It's about a character who cooks an absolutely amazing dinner for their friends. But there is a big problem. This person doesn't use a recipe. They just throw things into the pot, and later they can't remember how they made it.
I know that feeling so well. You make something perfect by accident, and then it is gone forever. This is going to be a fun story. For our listeners, we will speak slowly and clearly. We will also highlight some great English words related to cooking, taste, and feelings.
Exactly. So before we start the story, let's look at a few keywords. The first word is recipe. A recipe is a set of instructions that tells you how to cook something, including the list of ingredients. For example, I am looking for a simple recipe for chocolate cake.
Perfect. Another great word is ingredients. Ingredients are the food items you need to make a dish. For example, the ingredients for an omelet are eggs, butter, salt, and maybe some cheese. What is your favorite ingredient to cook with, Hannah?
Definitely garlic. I put garlic in almost everything. It adds so much flavor. Speaking of flavor, our next word is taste. To taste means to sense the flavor of something in your mouth. You can taste a soup to see if it needs more salt.
Great example. We also have the word frantic. Frantic means very excited, worried, or hurried because you have too much to do or you are in a rush. If you lose your keys 5 minutes before work, you might have a frantic search for them.
I hate that feeling. Okay, now that we know our key words, let's meet our main character. Her name is Sarah. Sarah lives in a small, cozy apartment with a very beautiful, sunny kitchen. She loves to cook, but she is not a professional.
Right. Sarah is what we call an intuitive cook. This means she does not like to follow rules or books. She likes to cook by feeling. She looks at her spice rack, she smells the herbs, and she just adds a pinch of this and a splash of that.
A pinch of this and a splash of that. I love those phrases. A pinch is a very small amount of something, usually what you can hold between your thumb and finger, like a pinch of salt. And a splash is a very small amount of liquid, like a splash of milk in your tea.
Yes, those are wonderful everyday expressions. So, Sarah decides to invite her 3 best friends over for a dinner party on Friday night. She wants to make something warm, comforting, and delicious because it is a cool autumn evening.
She decides to make a soup, but not just any soup. A special, creamy vegetable soup. She starts by chopping some onions, carrots, and celery. In English, we call these 3 vegetables the aromatic base, or sometimes a mirepoix in French cooking terms, but let's just stick to veggies.
Yes, veggies is a great informal word for vegetables. So she fries the veggies in a big pot with some olive oil. The kitchen begins to smell amazing. Then she starts to experiment. She opens her cabinet and looks at her spices.
She grabs some cumin, some sweet paprika, and a tiny bit of chili powder. Then she sees a fresh lemon on the counter. She squeezes the lemon juice into the pot. Next, she finds a can of coconut milk in the back of the cupboard and pours it in.
Wow, coconut milk, lemon juice, cumin, paprika. That is an interesting combination. She lets the soup simmer on the stove. To simmer means to cook something gently just below the boiling point. You see small bubbles, but it is not boiling rapidly.
While it is simmering, she decides to add one more thing. She finds some fresh basil leaves in her window garden, tears them up, and throws them in. Finally, she takes a big spoon, blows on the hot soup, and tastes it.
And how does it taste, Hana?
It is absolutely spectacular. It is creamy, slightly spicy, a little bit sweet from the coconut milk, and fresh from the lemon and basil. It is the best soup she has ever made in her entire life. She is so proud of herself.
She sounds like a culinary genius, but here's the problem. She did not write down a single measurement. She didn't measure the cumin, she didn't count the basil leaves, and she didn't check how much coconut milk she poured. It was all pure imagination.
Exactly. She thinks, oh, it doesn't matter. I will just enjoy the night. Soon, her friends arrive. They ring the doorbell, and they bring a bottle of juice and some fresh bread. They walk into the apartment and immediately say, wow, what is that incredible smell?
That is the best compliment a cook can get. They sit down at the dining table, and Sarah serves the soup in beautiful ceramic bowls. Her friends take their first spoonfuls. There is absolute silence at the table for 5 seconds.
5 seconds of silence can be scary when you cook for people. But then her friend Mark looks up and says, Sarah, this is the most delicious soup I have ever eaten. You have to give me the recipe. My sister is visiting next week, and I must make this for her.
Oh no, the dread begins. Sarah smiles warmly, but inside her heart drops. She realizes she has absolutely no idea how she created this masterpiece. She says, oh, sure, I will write it down for you later. Let me just enjoy the dinner first.
So the dinner is a massive success. They finish every single drop of soup in the pot. Her friends even use pieces of bread to wipe their bowls clean. They laugh, they talk, and finally they say goodbye. Sarah cleans the kitchen, washes the bowls, and goes to sleep with a happy belly and a big smile on her face. But then, the next morning arrives.
Ah, the morning after. The sun rises, the birds are singing, and Sarah wakes up. She walks into the kitchen to make some coffee, and then she sees it. A small bowl on the counter with just 2 tablespoons of the leftover soup. And suddenly, she remembers her promise to Mark. You have to give me the recipe. She remembers her own words. I will write it down for you later.
She freezes. The panic starts to set in. To set in means to start to happen or be felt, especially something unpleasant. For example, when the rain started, coldness began to set in. Or after 2 hours of waiting, boredom set in. For Sarah, panic is setting in because she has to write this recipe today. Mark is waiting for it.
She sits down at her kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and a blue pen. She stares at the paper. She writes, Sarah's amazing coconut soup. Then she writes, Step 1, and she stops. How much onion did she use? Was it 1 big onion or 2 small ones? She cannot remember.
This is a nightmare for a cook. So she decides she must do a sensory recreation experiment. This is a fancy way of saying she is going to use her senses, specifically her taste and her smell, to try to guess the exact ingredients and measurements. She looks at the tiny bit of leftover soup in the bowl. It is cold, but it is her only clue.
Yes, her only clue. It is like a delicious crime scene, and she is the detective. She takes a clean teaspoon, dips it into the cold soup, and puts it in her mouth. She closes her eyes. She concentrates. She tries to deconstruct the flavor. To deconstruct means to break something down into its individual parts to understand it better. For example, the chef tried to deconstruct the traditional cake to make a new dessert.
Right. She is deconstructing the soup in her mind. She tastes sweetness. Okay, that is the coconut milk. But how much? Was it 1 can or half a can? She opens her fridge. She has 3 different cans of coconut milk. One is full, one is half empty, and one is totally empty in the recycling bin. She looks at the empty one. Ah, she thinks, I used 1 full can of coconut milk. She quickly writes that down on her paper.
Great job, Detective Sarah. That is 1 ingredient down, and about 10 more to go. Next, she tastes a bit of spice. It is warm and earthy. That must be the cumin. But cumin is very strong. If you use too much, it ruins the dish. If you use too little, you cannot taste it. She tastes the cold soup again. She smacks her lips. Was it a teaspoon or a tablespoon?
Oh, a tablespoon of cumin would be way too much. That would taste like dirt. Let's teach our listeners the difference between these 2 spoons because it is very important in English recipes. A teaspoon is a small spoon, the one you use to stir sugar into your tea or coffee. We often write it as TSP. A tablespoon is a large spoon, the one you use to eat soup or serve food. We write it as TBSP.
Exactly. A tablespoon is much bigger than a teaspoon. In fact, 3 teaspoons fit into 1 tablespoon. So if you make a mistake and use a tablespoon instead of a teaspoon, your food will be ruined. Sarah knows this. She writes down 1 teaspoon of cumin. Maybe 1.5? She puts a question mark next to it.
Next is the ginger. Ginger has a very sharp, spicy, fresh taste. Sarah remembers grating the ginger. To grate means to rub food against a sharp tool called a grater to cut it into tiny, thin pieces. You can grate cheese, carrots, or ginger. For example, I always grate some cheese over my pasta.
And when you grate ginger, it is hard to measure it in spoons because it is a wet, messy pile. Usually, recipes say something like a thumb-sized piece of ginger or 1 inch of ginger. Sarah looks at her thumb. She tries to remember the piece of ginger she used yesterday. Was it as big as her thumb or smaller? She decides to write a medium piece of ginger grated with love.
I like that. Grated with love. But love is not a standard measurement, Alex. Mark's sister might get very confused. Anyway, now we come to the hardest part, the lemon juice. Sarah remembers squeezing a fresh lemon over the pot, but lemons are all different. Some are very juicy, some are dry, and she did not measure the juice, she just squeezed.
This is where the experiment gets really wild. Sarah decides she cannot just guess anymore. She needs to recreate the soup in small cups to compare the tastes. This is a brilliant but frantic idea. She takes out 4 small glass cups. In each cup, she puts 1 tablespoon of warm water and 1 teaspoon of coconut milk. This is her base.
Oh, she is like a scientist in a laboratory now. In cup number 1, she adds 2 drops of lemon juice. In cup number 2, she adds 5 drops. In cup number 3, she adds 10 drops. And in cup number 4, she adds a whole squeeze. She takes a tiny spoon and begins to taste cup number 1, then cup number 2. Her kitchen is quickly becoming a total mess.
I can picture it. There are lemons cut in half everywhere, sticky coconut milk dripping on the counter, spices spilled on the floor, and Sarah is standing there with yellow turmeric stains on her fingers, looking slightly crazy. Her eyes are wide, and she's whispering, "No, cup 2 is too sour. Cup 3 is too sweet. What did I do yesterday?"
It really is a kitchen science experiment. And this is the perfect moment to look at some English words we use when we describe how things taste. When Sarah tastes cup number 2, she says it is too sour. Let us talk about sour. It is a sharp, acidic taste, like a fresh lemon or a green apple. For example, if you drink black tea with lemon, it might taste quite sour. Do you like sour foods, Alex?
I do. I love sour candy. But in a warm soup, too much sourness can ruin the balance. And balance is everything in cooking. When Sarah tastes cup number 3, she says it is too sweet. We all know sweet, like sugar, honey, or ripe strawberries. In cooking, we often try to find the perfect balance between sweet and sour. If something is too sweet, you can add a little lemon juice to balance it out. If it is too sour, you might add a pinch of sugar.
Exactly. A pinch of sugar is a great word for measurements, too. A pinch is a very small amount of something, usually as much as you can hold between your thumb and index finger. For example, add a pinch of salt to the soup before serving. It is not a precise measurement like a gram or an ounce, but cooks use it all the time. And while Sarah is trying to find that perfect balance, she starts using some very interesting language. In English, when we are not 100% sure about something in the past, we use words like could have or might have. These are perfect for guessing. For example, Sarah looks at her messy counter and whispers, "I could have added more lime instead of lemon," or "I might have let the ginger cook for too long."
Yes, let us practice those structures because they are so useful for English learners. We use could have, followed by a past participle verb when we talk about possibilities in the past. For example, she could have gone to the supermarket, but she chose to stay home. In Sarah's case, she thinks, "I could have used 3 spoons of brown sugar." This means it was possible, but she does not remember if she did it.
And might have is very similar. We use might have when we are guessing about the past with even less certainty. For example, he might have lost his keys. Sarah stands over cup number 4 and says, "This might have been the taste, but my tongue is getting tired now." After tasting 4 different cups of spicy, sour, and sweet liquids, her taste buds are probably completely confused.
Oh, absolutely. Your taste buds are the tiny bumps on your tongue that help you taste different flavors. If you taste too many strong things quickly, your taste buds get tired, and everything starts to taste the same. Sarah needs to clean her palate. To clean your palate means to eat or drink something neutral, like plain water or a piece of bread, to reset your taste buds. For example, at fancy restaurants, they give you a small lemon sorbet to clean your palate between meals.
So Sarah drinks a big glass of cold water. She takes a deep breath. She closes her eyes and tries to remember the exact feeling of happiness she had last night when she ate the soup. She takes a tiny sip from cup number 3 again. Her face lights up. She yells, "This is it! It was cup number 3.
Hooray! The crowd goes wild! But wait, what was in cup number 3 again? Let us look at her notes. Cup number 3 had 1 tablespoon of water, 1 teaspoon of coconut milk, and 10 drops of lemon juice. But wait, how does she translate 10 drops of lemon juice into a big pot of soup?
Oh no, that is a huge math problem. If 1 little cup needs 10 drops, how many drops does a giant pot of soup need? Thousands of drops? This is where the kitchen science gets even more complicated. Sarah is not a mathematician. She cannot sit there and count 3,000 drops of lemon juice into her big pot.
She would be there until next week, and her brother's girlfriend is arriving in just 3 hours. Time is ticking. The phrase "time is ticking" means that time is running out quickly and you need to hurry. For example, the exam ends in 10 minutes and time is ticking.
So, Sarah decides to use her intuition. Intuition is that inner feeling or instinct you have rather than logical thinking. In cooking, we often call this cooking by feel. You do not use measuring cups. You just look, smell, and trust your hands. For example, my grandmother never used a recipe. She just cooked by intuition, and it was always delicious.
I love that. My grandmother was the same. If you asked her, "How much flour do I add?" she would say, "Until it feels right." That is so difficult for beginners, but it is a beautiful way to cook. Sarah decides she must trust herself. She writes down in her notebook, Step 4, add the juice of half a lemon, but taste it. If your face makes a funny, squeezed-up look, it is too much. If you smile, it is just right.
That is the best recipe instruction ever written. If your face makes a funny look, it is too much. I think all recipes should be written like this. It is much more fun than add 5 milliliters. But Sarah is not finished yet. There is one last secret ingredient that made the soup look so beautiful and green at the end.
Ah, yes, the fresh herbs on top. She remembers chopping a green herb and throwing it over the soup just before serving. But what was it? Was it parsley or was it cilantro? In some countries, cilantro is called coriander. This is a very common point of confusion. Parsley and cilantro look almost identical, but they taste completely different.
They really do look like twins. If you put them side by side, it is very hard to tell them apart just by looking. But if you rub the leaves and smell them, the difference is huge. Parsley has a very fresh, mild, grassy smell. Cilantro has a very strong, citrusy, and sometimes soapy smell. Some people actually think cilantro tastes like soap because of their genetics.
Yes, that is a real scientific fact. Some people have a gene that makes cilantro taste exactly like hand soap. Thankfully, Sarah is not one of those people. She loves cilantro. She runs to her fridge and opens the vegetable drawer. She finds a plastic bag with green leaves. She opens it, takes a leaf, and smells it. She holds her breath. If it is parsley, the soup might taste a bit too earthy. If it is cilantro, it will have that perfect, bright, fresh finish. She bites the leaf. It is sweet, citrusy, and slightly spicy. Yes, she cries, it is cilantro. She quickly writes down, garnish with a handful of fresh cilantro leaves.
And with that last word, cilantro, her recipe was complete. Or at least she hoped it was. This brings us to the final part of our story, the great test. Sarah looks at her notebook. The pages are covered in sticky watermarks, yellow curry stains, and messy handwriting. But she has a complete list of steps. Now she has to wait. Her friends are coming over again on Friday night, and she promised to make the exact same soup to prove she could do it.
Oh, the pressure. Imagine the stress of cooking the same meal for the same people, and they already have a memory of how perfect it was the first time. Our memories of food are always incredibly strong. If it is even a little bit different, and they will notice immediately. Friday night arrives and a doorbell rings.
Yes, her friends, Lily and Tom, walk in. The kitchen smells amazing already because Sarah has been following her handwritten guide perfectly. She was chopping, stirring, and measuring everything exactly as she wrote it down. Lily walks into the kitchen, sniffs the air, and says, "Oh my goodness, Sarah, it smells just like last week."
That is a good sign. But the smell is only 50% of the experience. The real test is the taste. Sarah ladles the hot, colorful soup into 3 deep bowls. She carries them to the dining table. Her hands are actually shaking a little bit. She places a bowl in front of Lily and one in front of Tom.
Yes, they pick up their spoons. Sarah does not eat. She just stares at them, watching their faces. This is that classic awkward moment when you cook for someone and you just watch them chew. Lily takes a spoonful. She blows on it to cool it down, and then she sips it.
Tom does the same. For 3 long seconds, there is absolute silence in the room. Sarah holds her breath. Then Tom looks up. His eyes are wide. He says, "Sarah, this is..."
This is what? Sarah asks, her heart beating fast.
This is even better than last week, he yells. Lily starts clapping her hands. Yes, it is perfect. How did you do it? You said you forgot the recipe.
Sarah laughs a huge sigh of relief. She pulls her messy notebook out of her pocket and slaps it on the table. "I did forget it," she says, "but my tongue remembered." And they all laugh and eat their soup. It is a beautiful, happy ending to a very stressful culinary adventure.
What a wonderful story, Hana. I love that. My tongue remembered. That is a great phrase. It shows that cooking is not just about numbers and strict rules. It is about using your senses, your sight, your smell, and your taste.
Absolutely. And now that our story has finished, let's take a look at some of the fantastic English vocabulary and cooking verbs we used today. This is a great chance for our listeners to review and practice.
Great idea. Let's start with some of the basic cooking verbs. We used the verb to chop.
This means to cut food into small pieces using a sharp knife. For example, you need to chop the onions before you fry them. We also talked about chopping finely or chopping roughly. Finely means very small pieces, and roughly means bigger, uneven pieces.
That is a very useful distinction. Another key verb we used is to stir. This means to move a spoon around in a circle inside a pot or a bowl. We do this to mix ingredients together or to stop the food from burning on the bottom of the pan. For example, please stir the soup while it boils.
And speaking of boil, that is another excellent verb. To boil means to heat a liquid until it starts to bubble hot and turn into steam. We boil water to make tea or pasta. But in our story, we also used to simmer. Hana, can you explain the difference between boiling and simmering?
Yes, this is a very common mistake for beginners. Boiling is very active, with big bubbles popping on the surface of the liquid. It is very hot. Simmering is much gentler. The heat is lower, and you only see small, quiet bubbles rising slowly. We simmer soups and stews for a long time so the flavors can mix together beautifully.
Exactly. You boil pasta, but you simmer soup. Remember that. Now, let's talk about nouns. We talked a lot about ingredients. An ingredient is any of the foods or substances that you combine to make a particular dish. For example, flour, sugar, and eggs are the main ingredients of a cake.
And we also mentioned seasoning and garnish. These are two great words. Seasoning refers to things like salt, pepper, spices, or herbs that you add to food to improve its flavor. Garnish is something you put on top of a finished dish to make it look attractive, like a slice of lemon or some fresh cilantro leaves. You can use garnish as a noun or a verb. You can say, I will garnish the soup with parsley.
Perfect. We also had some great adjectives to describe flavor. We talked about sweet and sour. Sour is that sharp taste you get from lemons or vinegar. And we talked about earthy, which describes a deep, natural flavor, like mushrooms or potatoes.
We sure did. I think our listeners now have a wonderful set of new tools to talk about cooking in English. The next time you make dinner, try to think about what you are doing in English. Are you chopping? Are you stirring? Are you simmering? It is a brilliant way to practice everyday vocabulary.
It really is. Well, everyone, that brings us to the very end of today's episode. Thank you so much for listening and practicing your English with us. We hope you enjoyed Sarah's cooking story, and we hope you feel inspired to trust your taste buds in the kitchen. Until next time, keep listening, keep practicing, and goodbye.